We're going to talk about cost behavior: variable cost, fixed cost, contribution margin, break even, and target profit. Variable costs change with activity. An example of that would be direct material. You're going to make more units, you need more material. Fixed costs do not change with activity. So for instance, the rent on the factory. If you make more units, doesn't matter. If you make fewer units, doesn't matter. The rent is the same amount to the landlord. Now, one of the students' misconceptions that I want to head you off right away is that fixed costs can change. They can go up and they can go down, but it has nothing to do with activity. So the weather can be hotter and the air conditioning costs can go up, but it has nothing to do with how many units you made. Your property taxes can go up because there's a new bond referendum or something, and so fixed costs can move. They just don't move because of activity. They don't shift with activity. We have a new term, contribution margin. Contribution margin is sales price minus the variable cost, and it gives you sort of a profit per unit. We can rearrange the income statement to show the contribution margin income statement, and that helps us to highlight the parts that are going to move and the parts that are sort of anchored in place. So here is the traditional income statement, and we're told that of cost of goods sold, 80% of it's variable and 20% would be fixed. And operating expenses are 90% fixed. That would mean 10% variable. So to create a contribution margin income statement, which would isolate the parts that shift around with activity and the parts that do not shift around with activity, we are taking the variable piece out of product and non-product and putting it here, and the fixed piece out of product and non-product and put it here. So what's this 51.5? That's 80% of product and 10% of non-product. That's the variable piece. Where did the fixed costs come from? That's 20% of product and 90% of non-product, which is what they told us it would be. Notice the profit's the same. It's the same cost. This is just rearranging a different sort of expenses. Here, product expenses are here. Non-product expenses are here. Here, variable costs, product or non-product, are here. Fixed costs, product or non-product, are there. So now that we have this contribution margin income statement, it makes it easy to discover what is break even. When is our profit zero? Right now profits are $5,000. At what point would profits be zero? Profits would be zero when the contribution margin was exactly fixed cost, wouldn't it? So we can get break even by figuring out how many units it would take to cover those fixed costs. So fixed cost over the contribution margin per unit will tell us the break even in units. So let's assume that we sold 10,000 units. So the contribution margin per unit would be the 48.5 divided by the 10. Here's our contribution margin per unit. Here's our fixed cost. Now this is usually rounded up to the next unit because of course you can't sell half a unit. Businesses are not content with breaking even. They want to make a profit. And so we can add to our break-even analysis by including a target profit result. So here, let's assume that they want to make 20,000 target profit. So we have to now sell enough units not only to cover the fixed cost, but to cover the fixed cost and the target profit. So it's added to the numerator. So let's do that calculation here. So we have our fixed cost plus our desired profit divided by our contribution margin per unit, and it would take 13,229.166 units to generate enough contribution margin here to cover the fixed cost and leave you with 20,000 left. And we would usually just round this up to the next full unit. It is unusual for firms to sell just one unit. So the break even, where we're looking back at how many units to sell, is not very useful once you have many units. So when you have a multi-unit firm, you calculate break even or break even and target profit using the contribution margin ratio. The contribution margin ratio is the contribution margin over the sales. So then break even for this firm would be their fixed cost divided by the contribution margin ratio here, which is 42% or 0.42. And so we would have to sell 71,428.571 sales dollars, not units, sales dollars, in order to achieve break even.